Hello, my name is Tacia Burgin. I'm a fourth-year clinical psychology doctoral student at the University of Missouri, Kansas City, and today I'm going to be talking to you about mental health stigma in the African American church community. African Americans represent over 13% of the U.S. population and 16% of U.S. adults affected by mental illness. Some of the more frequent diagnoses among African Americans include depression, anxiety, PTSD, substance use disorder, and suicide. Literature states that depression and anxiety often goes under or misdiagnosed in our community. This may be due to African Americans experiencing more physical symptoms such as lack of energy, sleep disturbance, or general aches and pains, opposed to classic psychological symptoms like low mood, poor concentration, or loss of interest in activities and people. It could also be masked by other health conditions such as hypertension, cardiovascular disease, and arthritis. African Americans are more likely to have a PTSD or substance use disorder compared to other races and ethnicities and have reported high risk factors for suicide. These risk factors include substance use, racism, discrimination, mood and anxiety disorders, identifying as LGBTQ, living at or below the poverty level, and prior suicide attempts. Although there is a need for more utilization of professional mental health services among the African American population, there are some barriers they face in getting these services, including age, medical mistrust, limited access or information about mental health, and mental health stigma. Stigma is defined as an attribute that is deeply discrediting and declines someone from a whole and usual person to a tainted, discounted one. And there are several stigmas African Americans, specifically church-affiliated African Americans, hold against mental illness and mental illness treatment. Although religiosity or spirituality has been shown to be a protective factor against mental illness, religiosity may also be damaging to mental health. For example, some studies have found that African Americans may believe that having a mental illness is a spiritual problem, believing the illness is an act of the devil or a punishment from God that can only be alleviated through religious acts. Other stigmatizing thoughts are that specific diagnoses are connected to more discrimination and social exclusion. African American men may believe that a depression diagnosis threatens their masculine appearance. Many believe that anxiety is a choice or a personal problem. African Americans don't experience anxiety due to biological differences across races, and African American youth do not have mental health issues. Many African Americans believe that those who seek or need mental health treatment are weak, dangerous, or have a serious or severe condition. Lastly, research has stated that African Americans tend not to seek treatment, hide mental illness diagnosis from family or peers, prefer to seek counseling from religious leaders or clergy, and prefer to distance themselves from individuals with mental illness due to mental health stigma. Using the health stigma and discrimination framework, the present study examined what may predict mental health stigma in the African American church-affiliated population. We gathered data from 200 African American churchgoers and community members who used outreach services provided by the 4 churches we partnered with in Kansas City, Missouri. Majority of our participants were female, and the average age was 53 years old. Preliminary analysis indicate that these participants had moderate to high levels of mental health stigma. Additionally, social support from others, social beliefs about being stigmatized by others, religious activities such as prayer or reading scriptures, collaborative religious coping, and self-directed religious coping were found to be related to mental health stigma. Specifically, social support has been valuable in addressing mental health concerns, and engaging in religious activities may be related to decreased mental health concerns. Collaborative religious coping, or working together with God to understand or solve a stressful situation, was related to less overall stress and mental health stigma. According to the linear regression, self-directed religious coping, or attempting to understand or deal with a stressful situation without God's help, was a predictor of mental health stigma. Some African Americans may engage in this type of coping because of negative beliefs about the connection between having a mental illness and religiosity or spirituality. Although this study examined many potential factors related to mental health stigma among African Americans, there remains a need to understand additional drivers that may be related or predictive of mental health stigma. Research should also examine how natural religious functions of the church can be used for mental health education on causes, symptoms, availability of services, and coping with mental illness. Thank you all for listening.